Good day everyone, I am Derlyn G. Borac, your presenter for today, and I am sharing Module 3. My topic is about poetry and hyperpoetry. In this lesson, we have the history of poetry, elements of poetry, structure of poetry, and examples. And now, what is poetry? Poetry has been derived from the Greek word poiesis, which means making. It's a type of literature written in not so ordinary words that usually follows a set of rules like rhyme and meter. The words used in writing poetry from sounds, images, and evokes emotional response. And what is history of poetry? Poetry is considered the older form of arts predates writing texts. It is frequently related to musical tradition. In fact, the earliest poetry is believed to be recited or sung. Many poems during the ancient times are recorded prayer or history about religion subject. What are the types and elements of poetry? Number 1. Speaker is the voice in the poem that talks to the reader. The speaker is not necessarily the poet. It refers to itself as I or me, or sometimes in a third person like he, she, his, or her. Number 2. Senses and images are words or word praise used by the writer to create an image that reader can see through his senses. Number 3. Diction is an important element in Filipino poetry. It is a denotative and connotative meaning of word in a sentence, phrase, paragraph, or poem. Denotative gives us the literal or dictionary meaning of word, while connotative gives us the word's meaning to word association to another word. Number 4. Theme refers to the meaning of the poem. It is the overall message of the poem that may be stated directly or indirectly. Other elements of poetry that make sounds play. Number 5. Alliteration is the repetition of initial consonant sounds on the same line or stanza. Number 6. Repetition is the repetition of entire lines or phrases to emphasize key thematic ideas. Number 7. Onomatopoeia are words that sounds like that which they describe other elements of poetry that makes meaning, emotion, and imagination to the reader. Number 8. Simile is the rhetorical term used to designate the most elementary form of resemblance. Most similes are introduced by use or like or as. Number 9. Metaphor are words that implies or direct comparison between object or situation without the use of like or as. Number 10. Personification is giving or treating inanimate object as human by giving them human attributes like powers or feeling. And now, what are the structure of poetry? A stanza is a group of lines that form the basic metrical unit in the poem. So in 12-line poem, the first 4 lines might be a stanza. You can identify a stanza by the number of lines. It has a rhyme, scheme, or pattern such as AB, AB. There are many different types of stanza. A couplet is a stanza with 2 lines that rhyme. A tercet is a stanza with 3 lines that may or may not rhyme. Tercet is also known as triplets. A quatrain is a stanza with 4 lines that may or not rhyme. A quatrain is a stanza with 5 lines that may or may not rhyme. A sestet is a stanza with 6 lines that may or may not rhyme. A septet is a stanza with 7 lines that may or may not rhyme. An octave is a stanza with 8 lines that may or may not rhyme. Rhyme are words that end with the same sound, hat, cat, and bat rhyme. Rhyming patterns AAB. Lines 1 and 2 rhyme and lines 3 and 4 rhyme. ABAB, lines 1 and 3 rhyme and lines 2 and 4 rhyme. ABBA, lines 1 and 4 rhyme and lines 2 and 3 rhyme. ABCB, lines 2 and 4 rhymes and lines 1 and 3 do not rhyme. Meter is the rhythmic structure of the poem. Sometimes you can feel the meter and rhyming by tapping for each syllables. Syllables can be stressed, strong and loud, or unstressed, weak and quiet. Line break is where a line of poetry ends. This is also where you point out commas, periods, hyphens, etc. to show the effect this have on how poem is read. So now, let's proceed. In the 21st century, Philippine literature engaged more on developments of digital writings via new technology, like Wattpad, ebook, reading application with audiovisual clips that support the narrative and novel. Now, think of hyper poetry and flash fiction, which has been brought to an extreme. What is hyperpoetry? Hyperpoetry is also called cyber poetry that uses computer screen as medium rather than the printed page, since it has verse with links to sub-poems and footnotes. It also has poetry generator, poetry with movement or images, and can be written in a number of different languages. Concrete poetry is a form of poetry in which meaning of the words are conveyed partly by the shape of the letters and words as well as their shape. The shape formed by the letters themselves or the shapes they take to convey meaning. To simply say, hyperpoetry are work poems on the web. To simply say, hyperpoetry work poems on the web. Example, as hyperpoetry I said earlier is the Wattpad or ebook. And lastly, I will show you a piece of poetry is called Flea by Leslie Milcamp. O singer, sing to me. I know the words are awry. I know how piteously the hungry children cry. But I bleed warm and near. And come another down, the world will still be here. When home and heart are gone. And that's for my report. Thank you for listening. I hope you gain a lot of knowledge.